an error occurred. Let's try this again. From the time Kyle Shanahan got the 49ers head coaching job in 2017, he has been the emperor, the Shah, the grand poobah of the 49ers. That is not the case anymore. We'll talk about it all on today's Gold Standard Podcast. What is good, everybody? Welcome to the Gold Standard Podcast on the Gold Standard and the Fans First Sports Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera. She's Michelle Majuk. I am fired up today, Michelle, and it's all Mike Silver's fault. He has an article in The Athletic that it's just depicting major changes for the 49ers. I'm sure you're going to poo-poo it and you're going to dismiss it, but I'm fired up today.
I'm not really going to dismiss it. I think there's a lot of substance to it, and they're probably going to change the way they run, at least this offseason, which I just don't know if it's a good or bad thing, right? I think there can be a drastic way to change their philosophy, which might end up hurting them just as much as, we'll get into it. But I do think there's a way to meet in the middle here, and I'm worried that they're going to go too drastic the other way.
We are going to break it all down in 1 second, I promise you. But we did promise today roasting and toasting of me because we want your reviews on the podcast on Apple Pods. Michelle, do you have your mimosa?
I do, of course.
Okay.
I always have my mimosa.
Michelle's going to read a review, then she's going to roast me, and then we will get into the Mike Silver stuff, I promise. So the floor is yours.
So this is just one of them. We'll do more later. But the first, I love this review by J. McNutton. Rob, you built a great team that provides a well-rounded and balanced review of the 49ers that I've come to count on. A fun mix of experience analysis and the fanatic. Keep it up and drink up, Michelle. That I will do. Cheers to you, J. McNutton. Stats, your Trey Lance takes are so bad, they got the entire SB Nation podcast network shut down.
Damn, that cuts deep, Michelle. That cuts deep. It's not my fault that SB Nation decided to shutter all their podcasts. Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
God, ruthless. All right. Well, we'll do the rest of those at the end of the show. Damn, I'm not looking forward to this segment, though. It has worked, by the way. Thank you to everybody that has a review. We see the reviews. Thank you. Please keep them coming. All right. Let's dig into it, Michelle. And we're going to start. I have excerpts from the article that I'm going to read. Okay. Here's the first one. Quote, in the wake of a 6-11 season, a more significant change has taken place. Going all in is out. Coach-driven emotion is no longer a guiding principle. The 49ers are attempting to be cold, calculated, and analytical when it comes to roster decisions, an organizational reset that coincides with the negotiation of a massive contract extension for Brock Purdy. Purdy, the NFL's most underpaid player during his first 3 seasons, wants a lot of York's money, more so than in past years. There will likely be a fight for every penny. Now, let's put the Brock stuff aside for a second. Going all in is out. Coach-driven emotion is no longer a guiding principle. Michelle, they are neutering Kyle Shanahan, and they are depicting Kyle Shanahan as an emotional coach's buddy, or player's buddy, I should say, and someone that is not capable of making football decisions.
And I do think that's fair, right? And I don't think a head coach should have this much say. It really hasn't typically worked out when the coach tries to be the GM. I know Bill Belichick did it for a while and won all those Super Bowls, and that's great. But he also had Tom Brady. So we don't know what side it was, right? But, I mean, he has made some really bad decisions lately that have cost this team. Whether, we don't know if the Brandon Aiyuk getting paid is a bad decision yet, right? But they've really gone in on this offseason. So Brandon Aiyuk can't be feeling good about that. But the Deebo not wanting to trade him, now they waited too long. And now they got, a 5th-round pick for him and have to owe him all this dead cap money, too. On top of that, they waited too long to get rid of Deebo when he had actual value, even just as last offseason. They traded up, gave all those picks because he just needed Trey Lance, and then didn't even give him the opportunity. So he has made some rough decisions lately that has been, it seems like it's been very much only happening. Like these decisions have only been made because Kyle Shanahan is banging the door for them.
Now, if that was the only thing that they said, maybe I would be a little less fired up, but they continually paint Kyle as this emotional guy. Check out this one. It makes sense that York would prefer Shanahan focus on doing what he does best, scheming it up and coaching the players on the roster, rather than worrying about making sure so many of his highest profile players make bank. Sometimes forging strong locker room relationships can complicate business decisions. That is another haymaker, Michelle, from Jed York and Parag Marathe. Hey, Kyle, shut up and coach. We'll handle the other stuff. And it is stunning to me how stark this is. And if you think Kyle Shanahan is going to take this lying down, you got another thing coming. Like, they are publicly humiliating him.
And I just feel like this is such an odd time for this all to come out. It really feels that it's on purpose, saying like, Brock Purdy, you're not going to get what you want. This is what it really feels like. Because why else is this all coming out right now, right? It has to do with, I don't think that York wants to pay Brock Purdy $55-60 million a year. I think he's very set on that. And he's like, Kyle Shanahan's going to throw a fit. He wants him really bad and he's going to throw a fit, but I don't care is basically what it's sounding like. And this is getting me worried about how long the contract negotiations are going to go on for.
Oh, yeah. Buckle up for that. We can get to that. Here's more from Silver. In past years, as he decided whether to dole out a massive signing bonus to Purdy, York might have been swayed by his coaches and his GM's conviction. This time, I expect the owner and his chief negotiator, executive vice president of football operations, Paraag Marathe, to be as ruthless as they deem appropriate. Another thing owners don't love, shelling out millions of dollars to players who don't produce, especially when those decisions are arguably impacted by impulse and emotion. Again, it's Kyle's fault. Kyle's impulse and emotion led to all these bad deals. Again, essentially blaming Kyle Shanahan for all of this stuff. So you have ownership and the front office. Well, I shouldn't say the front office because it's not John Lynch. You have ownership and Parag Marathe blaming Kyle Shanahan for the 49ers bad contracts and for the 6-11 season. That's what you have right now. The 49ers organization that was so aligned and so on the same page is now fractured and split down the middle. This is horrible, horrible news for an organization, Michelle. And for the record, I am not against Kyle Shanahan being reined in as the general manager of the team. I can understand that part of it. I don't, want him publicly like humiliated like this. And number two, I don't want him reined in by Parag fucking Marathe. Are we serious? This guy doesn't know his ass from his elbow. Okay. I was old enough to remember the day that Paraag Marathe got dismissed as 49ers president. It was December 4th, 2015. And there was universal joy from fans, from the 49ers beat at the time, joy that he was going to be out and just made a cap guy and put in charge of the soccer crap. It was universally acknowledged as a good move from everybody. And now he's back. He's back, Michelle. It's going to be Parag making the football decisions, not Kyle, not John. And I think this is bad news for the 49ers.
It is. I think the timing is super, super bad news because they're going to decide to have this stance about the most important position on their team. This is not the time to try to play hardball and be cheap and say, well, no, like we've been paying these guys out. Like Brock Purdy's actually the one you need to worry about. Actually, like the quarterback, once you find one, you need to keep them. And I think this can kind of unravel this entire relationship. If they, let's say they do try to trade Purdy away or they don't give him that contract and Kyle Shanahan can't get his way, maybe Shanahan wants out. Maybe he doesn't want to continue to be the 49ers head coach. I do think it's going to create so much tension in the coaching rooms, in the management team, like everything. It's not a great way to go about this. Like you can do it with other positions and say, listen, we're not going to keep paying, these wide receivers or these skill players. Like you have a good scheme. You say you can do this. Like, let's stop overpaying these players and getting emotionally attached. But when it comes to the quarterback position, this is not the position to mess around with.
And like that other slide that I brought up said, it's going to be a battle for every penny is essentially what it was. That's not we were supposed to wrap this up right quick and in a hurry. Nope, that is not the case. It's going to be a prolonged struggle. And I think you nailed it, Michelle. If this could be the very beginning of the end of the Kyle Shanahan era with the 49ers. Kyle has talked repeatedly. He has thanked Jed York at every opportunity for how much money Jed York has spent, for Jed York essentially signing off on everything that Kyle Shanahan wanted to do. He's openly acknowledged that at all times. And now this is a very public statement that is not going to be the case. And don't forget, Kyle Shanahan's the same guy that once came up with a 31-point PowerPoint presentation to get out of his contract with the Cleveland Browns. That's a real thing that happened. He and Mike McDaniel literally created a PowerPoint presentation to get out of his contract in Cleveland, to convince them to let him out of his deal. If Kyle doesn't want to stick around, Kyle ain't going to stick around. And he hates ownership meddling, because it all goes back to what happened in Washington with his dad when they were trying to get Peyton Manning, and then the owner forced them not to do that and get RG3 instead. And then RG3 and the owner had their own separate thing. And when the Shanahans wanted to go with Kirk Cousins, the owner stuck with RG3, and it all fell apart, and his dad got fired, and Kyle has never gotten over all of that stuff. I'm telling you, I think this article is a huge shift in the 49ers. And I would not be surprised if everything unravels fairly quickly, maybe after next year.
It could. I mean, it might start right now, right? Because I'm getting I think if they butcher this Brock Purdy, we said this right after the season, and we were kind of kidding around, right? Like, they're going to make this negotiation so much harder than it has to be, and they're going to drag it out, and it's going to ruin the offseason, and it's going to ruin their preparation. Well, now it's really looking like that's going to be the case, right? I do think their biggest issues with overpaying these players is that they're not just overpaying them, they're waiting to the very last moment to do it. So then they didn't even get their offseason. Like, it's messed with their brain the whole time. They weren't with the team. It just creates such an issue for that first season coming back after getting the contract extension, because you haven't been with the team. You haven't been focused on that season. You've been focused on your contract. And that's the issue, right? They're doing a double whammy here, where you don't get them to participate in the offseason, and then also you're paying them what you're going to pay them anyways. So I do get the whole, like, we can't let Kyle Shanahan keep making these huge decisions for us. If we really didn't want to pay Brandon Aiyuk, then you shouldn't have, right? If you really wanted to trade Debo, you should have. If you really didn't want to trade up all those picks for Trey Lance because the scouting department didn't think that he would be a hit, right? If most people in there didn't feel good about that, then you shouldn't have. But this is not about just paying the players that have proven that they should be paid. Like, the Nick Bosa one, yeah, you probably went above and beyond, but that's your fault, right? Again, he deserved to be paid. He got paid. Maybe you paid him a couple million extra per year, but like, overall, I do think, like, the whole going cheaper thing, I don't think necessarily has to be the case. You just have to be smarter about your decisions.
I completely agree with you. And I agree with Jose Campos, who says this is what happens when you don't win that ring. That's what it all comes down to. But this whole thing centers on the fact that Jed York is mad because he paid out so much money and they didn't win a Super Bowl. You just mentioned the reason why they paid out so much money is because of when they signed these guys. And that leads us to this from the article. And this is the most stunning thing of all. Quote, again, this is Mike Silver's article in The Athletic. Quote, as good as the 49ers have been on the field since 2019, they've appeared strangely vulnerable in the negotiating realm. In addition to Samuel 3 years ago and Aiyuk last summer, tight end George Kittle, Bosa, and Williams all signed deals in August or later that sapped organizational energy. Samuel and Bosa each later admitted that the disputes had taken a personal toll that they attributed in part to their subpar seasons, all of which brings us to the current state of the franchise and the prospect of drawn-out, contentious negotiations with Purdy. Well, who is the one constant in all of those negotiations, Michelle? Who is the lead guy in charge of the negotiating? It's Paraag Marathe, who now Adam Silver is saying is going to be the one making the quote-unquote ruthless decisions. It makes no sense to me. The 49ers are trying to blame Kyle Shanahan for spending all this money, but the reason they're spending all this money isn't Kyle Shanahan, it's Paraag Marathe.
I'm actually getting worried now for Brock Purdy. I don't know if he's going to be here next year. I can see them making a very, very stupid decision. And I think fans and even probably the 49ers organization are undervaluing Purdy, because how late of a draft pick he was, right? If they if this is what they moved up for Trey Lance, right? And he was giving them this production and brought them to an NFC championship and a Super Bowl and has put up the numbers he has put up. I mean, he literally leads the NFL, all quarterbacks in passing yards per attempt and passer rating since becoming the starter in 2022, right? And you can say, well, it's Kyle Shanahan's offense. Fine. But if he did this as a highly drafted player, it'd be so easy to pay him. You do it in 0.5 seconds. All of the fan base would be in on it. But because he was a later drafted guy, people hold these thoughts about him that he's not worth it. And because Jimmy Garoppolo had an okay career with the 49ers, they think that Shanahan can get any quarterback to do well. But the thing is, you can compare all of the numbers that is past just the normal box score and downfield passing, burst of blitz, in tight windows, like a playmaking ability, not just short, quick passes, also not just yards after the catch. You can compare those all across the board from Purdy to Garoppolo, and Purdy is like 100 times better than him in every single one of those categories. Purdy is Garoppolo, but with the extra stuff on top that we wanted, right? Like, he can do the easy stuff in Shanahan's offense, but he can also take it to that next level when things do fall apart and everything is not perfectly executed, which Shanahan loves to say.
Yes. I mean, I hate to keep saying I agree after everything you say, but I do agree with all of that. I think this is going to get UGLY ugly, and I don't like any of this. And for the record, I've been going back and forth on Twitter with Mike Silver. He says he hasn't talked to Paraag or Jed. That's fine. You don't have to speak directly to them to get a message from them. And if you don't think Paraag Marathe leaks, by the way, let me just take you back. This is Tim Kawakami from December 4th, 2015, when it was announced that Paraag was dismissed as 49ers president, when he was demoted. And you could tell a big difference in how Tim Kawakami used to talk about this team, by the way. Quote, "We shall see how this breaks. Don't bet on logic, transparency, or credibility with the Yorks. It's interesting that NFL sources indicated Marathe lost power partly because York is blaming Marathe for many of the recent leaks to national reporters. York, of course, is also believed to be a source for many leaks over the last few seasons, especially the flood of reports last season about Jim Harbaugh's inevitable firing. On the surface, York might be trying to purge a leaker from the front office, but really, this is the culture York created and maintained, and if he wants to stop the leaks, he obviously has to stop leaking himself. Let's see if he can and will do that." This is not a new thing from Jed York and Paraag Marathe, as this article clearly states from 2015. This is what they do. So, yes, I firmly believe it's coming from York and Jed, whether it's directly or they're talking to other people who are then talking to Mike Silver. And pretty much everybody on the 49ers beat, because the message has pretty much been unanimous this offseason. I hate this, Michelle. I hate this so much. Again, if you want to rein in Kyle Shanahan as GM, I'm down with that. I understand that decision, but not for Paraag Marathe. And you can't have this schism in the franchise when you're trying to negotiate a contract with your star quarterback. It's crazy. Antonio, YouTube channel member, says, "How the hell is bleeping on your coach this offseason after a bad year a good idea? This sounds like the organization is setting up excuses to fire him after 2025 if it doesn't go as planned." And by the way, they're not going to pay anybody. They're not paying anybody. And then they're going to say, well, you had a down year in 2025. Now you're out. Okay.
Especially if they don't pay Purdy and they make this a whole thing and they don't have a quarterback for next year, right? It's a wild overreaction to a 6-11 season after making 4 conference championships in the last 5 years and 3 in a row going into 2024. I do think, like, clearly what they've been doing has been working, right? And I do think there's some mistakes in here that Shanahan has made. And I do think it's unfair. I think they're holding this Aiyuk contract so hard against him, right? Mm-hmm. And he tore his ACL and he tore all of his CLs, and that stinks. And he was not great prior, and I get that. But I feel like they're jumping the gun here so much on this Aiyuk contract. Like, they just hate that they paid him so much. They clearly didn't want to pay him, right? Because if they wanted to, they would not be giving up on him this quickly. They clearly had no desire to pay him. They wanted to trade him. They had the trade done very clearly. The Steelers were like right there. They just had to press, say accept. And it didn't happen because of Kyle Shanahan's emotions, right? From this article, they said he runs up, to stop the trade, basically. I do think they're holding that so hard against him that it's going to maybe destroy this hope of this franchise, getting back to where they were just in 2023, because they feel the need that just to pretty much tear it all down. I feel like at this point,
I don't think I think they're going to trade Aiyuk, quite frankly. I think they're going to trade Aiyuk this offseason.
Can they? Like, how much dead money would there be?
Jed doesn't care about the cap dead money. He cares about the bonus money. They took a $30 million cap hit just to acquire a 5th-round pick for Deebo Samuel. They want that Aiyuk contract off the books right quick and in a hurry. JCG 1987 YouTube channel member, thank you, says it's Jed versus Harbaugh all over again. It certainly seems like it. You've got a divide on the 49ers. I don't like it. It's hurting. Like you just said, it could destroy the relationship with Aiyuk. Like now it could hurt your players on the field. I have a whole video up on the channel about how people are crapping on Brandon Aiyuk unnecessarily. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to him. And I don't think it's certainly not helpful.
No, I mean, if you're Aiyuk right now, you're like, dang, like I didn't get like any of the offseason because they wouldn't pay me. It took forever. They finally and he was also fine with the trade, right? Like figure it out. I don't know. They took forever to figure out. Then they just gave him what he wanted anyways. So it's like, why did we go through all of this? It's like a headache. So he started slow. Yep, that's what happened. And he did start slow. And then he got a terrible injury. I don't know. I don't know what to say. Like, looking back on the offer now, would you do it again? No, because you know what happened, but you didn't know what was going to happen. I do think this right here, I think that's just going to sit with them so hard that it's going to ruin any chances of Shanahan getting his way anymore. And that's just going to leave a really bad taste in probably Shanahan's mouth. There's going to be a lot of anger and resentment, I feel like, between Shanahan and York. And that's just never a way to have a winning formula. Like, that's not a way to build a culture to win a Super Bowl. That's just not.
No, it is not. The Big 25 says, I hope so, because Kyle has too much control over all operations. Again, I'm not opposed to some control for Kyle Shanahan. I just don't want Paraag Marathe to be the controlling one. Okay. Like, no, he's like freaking somebody said it in the chat. Now I can't find the comment. He's like Littlefinger, like whispering in the ear of whoever's on the Iron Throne. Like, no, man, no. Paraag Marathe somehow has managed to survive 4 GMs, Terry Donahoe, Scott McCloughan, Trent Baalke, and now John Lynch. Man, the guy is just,
the real question is, what does John Lynch do?
Nothing. Do you know what here's what John Lynch does. When apparently Kyle just MFs everybody. Like, you screw up, Kyle MFs everybody. John Lynch goes after that, talks to the person, smooths it out. How Kyle gets. Kyle gets emotional. John Lynch does a lot of the media obligations, right? Kyle doesn't go to the combine. John Lynch goes to the combine. John Lynch does the press conference. That's what John Lynch does. He's there to shake hands and kiss babies.
I mean, that seems like a huge waste of money to me if I'm Jed York. If you want to save some money, right? Like, I don't get it why it's like, well, if Kyle Shanahan, we don't want him to have much of a say. But instead of going to our GM and asking him to be more involved to make, to earn your money, we're going to go to someone else that we already know has failed in the past.
Andre Garibay, YouTube channel member, says Paraag shouldn't be the one making the damn decision. Kyle wants to overpay. Paraag wants to penny pinch. Can't have both extremes. And again, think about where we were. Jed York said at the owners' meetings, a quarterback, it's okay if he's your highest paid guy. That means you got a good one. It's okay if your quarterback makes over $40 million a year. What was their initial offer to Brock Purdy, reportedly? $45 million a year. Like, it is taken a massive turn, and I just feel like Jed York was simply just waiting for them to have a bad year. Because if he tried to do this after an NFC Championship game appearance or a Super Bowl appearance, he would have got roasted and utterly destroyed. But the Niners were horribly injured last year. They also did not coach their best, did not play their best, and they went 6-11. And now what happens? Immediately, Jed York swoops in, Paraag Marathe swoops in. They throw Kyle Shanahan under the bus, essentially. And now they're saying there's a new sheriff in town. We're going to make you fight for every penny that we spend. Great. Let's see how that's going to work out.
This is the biggest issue because the biggest issue comes down to this Brock Purdy contract, right? I mean, there's bigger underlying issues with if the relationship gets destroyed between Jed York and Kyle Shanahan, that could really mess up the whole franchise. But right at this moment, it does feel like this is all coming out because they're saying we're not going to let Shanahan emotionally be too emotional about this Brock Purdy contract. We're not going to let him tell us that we need to pay him a certain amount of money. Like, we're not going to overpay for him, right? And this is my problem, is that if they do decide that they don't want to pay him and they want to go the trade route, Brock Purdy is the most valuable to the 49ers, right? And I think that's okay. Like, people will be like, well, he wouldn't be a great quarterback for many teams. You only need him to be a great quarterback for your team, for your system. And that makes him worth paying for. And so I do think if they try to trade him, you're not going to get as much as you would, as what he's worth to your team. You're just not, because he's not worth that amount to 97% of other teams.
And what is your, I mean, so, okay, they don't want to pay Brock Purdy because they don't think it's worth it. All right, so you get rid of Brock Purdy, trade him, whatever. Are you going to, your alternatives are all going to be expensive, right? Aaron Rodgers is not going to play for cheap, I would imagine.
Imagine giving up on Brock Purdy, a 25-year-old who's brought you to two NFC championships and a Super Bowl and has put up great numbers and is thriving, for a 43-year-old who is coming off an Achilles, who is a disaster of a head case, for 1 year of potential. 1 year, which, by the way, he hasn't done anything in the playoffs since 2010. So that's what you're giving it up for. Like, that would be so incredibly crazy. And yeah, he's not going to come cheap either.
Okay, so then if it's not Aaron Rodgers, maybe it's Kirk Cousins, if they could finagle some sort of way to get him out. Right. Okay, it's not those two, it's Sam Darnold. Well, guess what? Sam Darnold is pretty much the only quarterback that was any good last year that is going to be available in free agency. So he ain't going to be cheap either. So again, you know, you can say that there's going to be a fight for Brock Purdy to pay him all this money, but like, you don't really have any other alternatives. You're the 49ers, unless you trade Brock Purdy and then maybe you package some other things and you move up in the draft to draft a quarterback this year. That is possible. And that would be cheap in terms of money, not in terms of assets that you give up to acquire that pick. But, the 49ers had the 12th pick and they gave up 3 firsts and a third to move up to number 3. So they've got the 11th pick this year. If they want to move up into the top 5, it ain't going to be cheap. So no quarterback option available to the 49ers this offseason is cheap.
I mean, if the Titans or the Browns or the Giants want to call up and trade for Purdy and they feel good about Cam Ward, that's pretty much the only option, right? But again, I don't think any of those teams are trading a top 3 overall pick for Brock Purdy to then also have to pay him, when they could just take a quarterback themselves. And again, like, Brock Purdy is so good in this system. Now, maybe he could be good in Brian Daboll's system or with the Titans, or, probably no one's going to be good with the Browns. But we don't know if Purdy can be good elsewhere. I think he would be I think he could be a starter across the league. I just think he's his best suited with Kyle Shanahan in that offense. But again, like the Dolphins paid Tua because it just makes more sense to pay him than trading him away. And Tua had all the issues with the concussions, right? That's the biggest issue. When Tua's on the field, they're 100 times better offense than anyone else they've ever had. It's like Mike McDaniels doesn't know how to coach anymore without Tua. And I think that's just the case here with Purdy, is that Purdy gives you the best chance to win of all the choices you have. And I mean, I'm sorry, he's better than the guys who are getting paid $55 million a year. He's better than Jordan Love. He's better than Trevor Lawrence. He's better than Dak Prescott at this time in his career, in Dak Prescott's career, and he's getting paid $60. So this is just what happens when you find a quarterback that's good. You have to pay him.
I'm just stunned by all of this. And if you're Brock Purdy, let me see. Okay, let me throw up the right thing here. Of course, now I can't find it. Here it is. I apologize. This last line from Silver in this little quote here. Purdy wants a lot of York's money, more so than in past years. There likely will be a fight for every penny. And now you're saying that even if Kyle Shanahan picks up the phone and goes to bat for you, that essentially it's not going to be enough. How do you think Brock Purdy feels reading all this and hearing all this? And, he sort of laid down the gauntlet saying, hey, I want to have this done by April 15th. So that was he said phase 1 of OTAs. That was around the middle of April. It doesn't sound like that is going to be the case. And then the question is going to be, what does Brock do? Does Brock sit and hold out? How much, how much power does each person want to exert? It sounds like Jed York is finally exerting his power in reining in Kyle Shanahan. Now, will Brock Purdy exercise the power he has, which is to withhold services and essentially muck up the entire vibes of the 2025 season, muck up the training camp, muck up all of that stuff? How much power is Brock going to exert?
Why can't the 49ers have a normal offseason? It's impossible for them. They love the drama. They should have a reality show because it seems like this, like producers, like putting in fake drama. You would think this is like all calculated. Like they're like, oh, we love to be the center of attention. There is never an off season where it's just a normal off season where the players can focus on being their best selves and being prepared for next season, where the coaches can just prepare and being the best selves. When they're deciding to make financial decisions in free agency, they know what they have because they're not still dealing with some guy that they have to pay that's getting dragged out in a contract negotiation. They make it so incredibly hard on themselves.
Because of Paraag. That's the answer. The guy that they want to give all this power to, it's because of the way the 49ers negotiate. For the past 3 days, Michelle, we have seen teams get deals done with guys that are important to them. The Eagles got a deal done with Saquon Barkley. They got a deal done with the linebacker.
Zach Bond, yeah.
They got a deal done with him. The Max Crosby deal, Mike Florio had the article, came together in a matter of hours for Max Crosby, who's now the highest paid defensive player in the history of the NFL. The reason that the 49ers have this offseason is because Paraag Marathe has this hardline negotiating stance where he's an asshole, and the 49ers don't want to do anything. And then eventually Kyle Shanahan begs and pleads and says, please get this done. And so what happens is the 49ers acquiesce to that, or what happened in the past is they acquiesce to that. But by that point, the market is higher. The player knows he has leverage, and he ends up squeezing all the juice from the 49ers orange. That's why this whole thing is hilarious, because they're trying to blame it on Kyle. It's Paraag's fault, because a well-run organization would decide early, we're going to listen to Kyle and we're going to pay this guy, so we're going to get the deal done early. But the 49ers don't do that. Then they battle and battle and battle until eventually Kyle wins. That's why there's all this drama all this offseason. Now the word from the 49ers is, well, that's not going to happen anymore. Which means what? Which means the Niners aren't going to be paying these contracts.
This is definitely this is the year they need to retool and regroup, and overpaying guys in free agency is definitely not the way to do that. So I'm not saying that's the only way to do it. And we did a whole show on Wednesday night at Bleacher Report of guys that we would like them to add in free agency. And most of the guys we said would come on pretty reasonable contracts, right? We're not just choosing all the biggest names and being like, bring in these guys, it'll fix everything. Right. Definitely not. That's not the way winning teams work. But at the same time, you have to be willing to pay the guys that deserve it. And they have been, right? I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think their decisions are necessarily the bad ones. It's about the execution. I'm going to use, the process and the execution. I'm going to use Kyle Shanahan's words, right? If they're just not executing it well. Like Brandon Aiyuk did deserve to get paid after his season, but you waited too long. Debo Samuel, he was good, and I get why you wanted him, but you probably should have traded him last year when he had trade value, right? And now they trade him. That's good, but it was a year too late. The trade, I was fine with them moving up for a quarterback, and I guess at this point, pretty much everyone in that class was a bust. So I don't know. You can't really say you just chose the wrong one. But in terms of Trey Lance is the one that didn't get a chance here, so you would have to say he's the worst one, right? So it's just I'm fine with their decisions. They're just not executing them properly.
This is a major shift for the 49ers. Paraag is back in town, and it's going to take us back to the bad old days. I really do believe that, because I don't think Kyle's going to stick around for this kind of stuff. And the Yorks suck at hiring coaches. Jed York is not a good owner. Good owners don't operate this way, Michelle. By the way, the Big 25, thanks for the super chat, says Paraag equals Farhan. That's very familiar to San Francisco Giants fans. Good teams don't operate this way, Michelle, because even if 49ers wanted to institute all of this, right? None of this has to be public. They don't have to tell anybody about this. Yet this is leaking out to every freaking person on the 49ers beat. A 49ers beat that, let's be honest, Michelle, doesn't break any stories. Yet they're all aware of this going on, which means somebody in the 49ers, Jed and Paraag, in my opinion, want this public. And they don't have to do this publicly. They don't, but they want a pound of flesh from Kyle Shanahan. They want people to know that it's Kyle's fault. And that is just not how good organizations are run.
And especially for Jed York, it's not like you're trying to save your job, because using his words, he can't be fired, right? He's the owner. So it's not like he's worried about losing his job, so he's trying to throw someone else under the bus. Like, your job obviously is secure. You're the owner. You're just literally throwing the most important person in your organization under the bus, all because you don't want to pay the most important player in your position what he's worth. Like that, see, to make the two most important people mad in Kyle Shanahan, your head coach, and then your starting quarterback, that just does not seem like a winning formula. To me, it seems pretty stupid.
You're right. Like when you say it out loud like that, it's just like, yeah, that seems pretty obvious, but yet here we are. Antonio, YouTube channel member, says coaching for Jed York is about to be the least attractive job in sports. After Kyle, it'll be 15 years of poverty. And look, I know what people are going to say. Rob, you're overreacting. Rob, you're freaking out. You're hyperventilating. Jed York has a right to be mad, this, that, and the other thing. Okay, let's just see where it all goes. That would be my only response. Okay, let's see how this continues. And I hope that Kyle Shanahan gets asked about this. He probably won't speak publicly until after the 49ers, maybe after the first round of the 49ers draft. I don't care what the 49ers do in the first round. Like, if they take a defensive lineman, an offensive lineman, no. This is the biggest issue around the 49ers right now. What's happening here, the fact that Kyle was publicly neutered is way more important than whoever they draft in the first round. And I pray to God that somebody asks him about it, because I would be fascinated to hear his answer.
Well, Mike Silver is normally one that doesn't typically put out, bad things about the 49ers, right? Or am I wrong there?
Well, Mike is super close to Shanahan and has been for a long time, because Mike. Do
you think Shanahan is actually okay with this article getting out here to be like, guys, I'm being neutered. Like, when we don't make these decisions, when we don't pay Brock Purdy, it's not my fault. Like, I've had these guys back, but now they don't want to pay him. Now they're being cheap. Like, could this be him being like, yeah, you can let this out?
Well, I don't think it makes Kyle look bad in the eyes of the players, right? If anything, it makes the players love Kyle even more. Like, he was going to bat for us and he helped get a lot of us paid. I would say that's probably the result of it from the player side of things. But again, it just sets up a whole divide. It sets up a labor versus management kind of divide of, hey, Kyle wants it, the head coach wants it, but the owner's cheap. The owner doesn't want to do it. And this is how the end of eras happen. And I'm telling you, I think this is the beginning of the end of Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers. I think the writing is on the wall, and people might disagree with me. That's okay. I feel pretty confident in this, to be honest with you. Because how does it get better, Michelle?
Yeah.
Like, unless what you have is Paraag Marathe makes like a bunch of really good decisions and Kyle coaches it up and the 49ers win, which I guess is possible. But I've seen Paraag Marathe with his hand at the wheel, and it was horrible for the 49ers. So I'm not encouraged. I'm not hopeful.
And I think we're going to know how bad it is right away, like starting next week, right? If we saw it with the Cowboys last year. They had one signing. It was like, you heard Jerry Jones be like, we're changing everything. Like, we're going to go all out for this year. And then they literally only add Eric Kendricks and Ezekiel Elliott pretty much the whole time. And they only added Elliott late in the free agency. So I do think we're going to see pretty quickly how much they're against spending money this year. If they're saying like, nope, they're going, then that means Jed York is going to feel like they're in a rebuild mode, right? Completely, and just build off the draft. And then Kyle Shanahan's definitely not going to feel like they're in rebuild mode. So they're going to have two completely different stances on how they want to run this team. And that's just going to be a disaster.
Frustrating days for the 49ers, at least for me. Tim Kawakami has a column out. It's 12 predictions. One of which, by the way, is that the Niners will sign Drew Dahlman in free agency, which sign me up for that. Just scanning this thing quickly. He thinks that Purdy will sign a top 12 deal by late May, which is very interesting. I want to see, he mentioned something about John Lynch. Let's see. Let me just read the first line of the article. We'll read it together. Quote, call this John Lynch moment. The 49ers general manager, of course, has been one of the franchise's busiest and most important figures since he and Kyle took over the football operation. But these next few months figure to be some of Lynch's busiest and most important. Yeah, they're pivoting off of Debo, blah, blah, blah. Lynch is set up to be the key player. He's the only guy who has the relationships to hammer out compromises across the franchise and who can keep this tied together from ownership to the financial side to Shanahan's coaching staff to the locker room. Lynch has already been doing this stuff. He's got a lot more of it coming right now. That is an interesting point by Kawakami, Michelle, because essentially what he's saying is you got Kyle who's going to say, pay all these guys. You've got Paraag Marathe and Jed York saying, we're not paying anybody. And he's the go-between. He's going to have to take the message from ownership and try and smooth it over to Kyle Shanahan. And he's going to have to take Kyle Shanahan going in his office saying, bravo, mother F bleep, blap, bloop, and then smooth that over when he takes that message to ownership. That's a very interesting point by Kawakami.
I mean, it is. And I don't feel very optimistic about the next few months. I think we're all going to be having headaches and annoyed. And it's just super annoying because we really don't know what's going inside the building either, right? We just have to like kind of have hearsay from reporters and people who know more and are more involved than we are. I will say his whole like prediction that Brock Purdy is going to be a top 12 paid quarterback by end of May is really weak, right? There's only 18 veteran quarterbacks getting paid right now. So top 12 is not being bold at all. He's not taken anywhere close to the 12th overall quarterback contract.
Unless his agent doesn't have a lot of experience with big contracts. So maybe he'll screw up essentially. I don't know. I mean, I don't like the idea of having to hope for that by any stretch of the imagination. Here's more from Kawakami in this article, which this scares me. Quote, in some ways, this situation is relatively comparable to the months leading up to the doomed split with Jim Harbaugh after the 2014 season. Ownership was tired of him and more tired of spending so much money without a Super Bowl title. Does that sound familiar? Harbaugh wasn't thrilled to feel the squeeze and let everybody know it. Shanahan isn't nearly as combustible as Harbaugh, but there are some similarities to their driven, grinding, mostly successful 49ers tenures and anguished losses. Big difference. Harbaugh was stuck with Trent Baalke as his GM, and Shanahan has Lynch, which is one large reason this era has already lasted double the length of the Harbaugh run. I don't like hearing that this era has similarities to the end of the last successful 49ers era, Michelle. I don't like it one bit.
And like, it's shocking to me because I just saw a team win a Super Bowl after making a lot of big contracts. They're paying a ton of big people as well. They also, I mean, you saw them pay Carson Wentz, right? And that was a mistake, but they drafted Jalen Hurts and figured it out. Like, I feel like they kind of put the blueprint out there for teams. Even last year, 2023, it falls apart, right? Coaching seems like it's a disaster. The players maybe seem like they're getting overpaid, and Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith and AJ Brown. And then they it's not like they drastically change anything. They were able to hit on some free agent additions. They were able to have a great draft, and then they win the Super Bowl. So it's just kind of funny to me that after watching the Eagles and how they have, run things in their organization and then win a Super Bowl, the 49ers kind of want to go the exact opposite of that.
Jed York gonna Jed York. That's all I could say. Ernest B. Worried, which I love your avatar. I was a huge fan of the Ernest movies back in the day, says the faithful get screwed once again. Thanks, Jed. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Jed. Sorry that you're so upset that you spent all this money. Meanwhile, you're rich, okay? You are rich. You are making money hand over fist. The idea that we need to hold a bake sale for Jed York is ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. He always talks about Eddie DeBartolo and how he wants to get back to the 49ers glory days and all that stuff. Well, I didn't see Eddie DeBartolo doing crap like this. Okay. He wants to be Eddie D. He's not Eddie D. Jed York, at his heart, is a penny pincher. And I don't care that he spent a lot of cash over the last half decade. If you're not a penny pincher, you know what you don't do? Complain about spending so much money. You just keep spending it. Okay. George Steinbrenner was the owner of the Yankees for years. He led the major leagues in payroll for years. And did he get mad when they didn't win? Sure. Did he stop spending money? No, because he knew that's what it takes to win. And Jed York, clearly the biggest priority for Jed York at this moment is not winning a Super Bowl in 2025. It's saving money. And when that's your ownership, you're screwed.
Yep. I mean, a 10 out of 10. I don't know what else to add there.
Sorry, I'm so angry at this. None of this has to be this way. We don't have to live in this world. And West Coast Offense says maybe if the 49ers were a soccer team, the Yorks would care. Yeah, since now 49ers Enterprises is going to be the primary owner of 2 soccer teams.
So maybe that's why they don't have as much money to spend on the 49ers.
Oh, they've got the money. Believe me, they've got the money. Even the 49ers beat that has been reporting all this stuff has said they've got the money. Look, we'll see how it plays out. Maybe some of Tim's predictions do come true. Maybe they do re-sign Brock Purdy. Maybe they do get Drew Dahlman. Maybe they do sign Tyler Lockett, as Tim is.
Oh gosh, please don't.
Oh, I wouldn't mind Tyler Lockett on a cheap deal.
No, just because they're cheap doesn't mean it's a good addition. No.
Well, anyway, my point is that if they spend money, they can still make upgrades to this team, and we'll see if they do that. But right now, it doesn't sound like they're going to be spending any money.
I know. Maybe this all blows up in our face on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and all of a sudden, maybe they have the Brock Purdy deal done and they sign a bunch of free agents. Maybe it's just all being overblown. Maybe they're just trying to, keep other teams thinking, oh man, the 49ers are a disaster right now. Who knows? But also, if I'm looking for a quarterback and the way that they're treating Brock Purdy right now, I actually am open. Like if I know I said I think he's his best with the 49ers, but if you're a team that can't, my Steelers, right? There's not really many options for them. Call up, see what they'll trade Brock Purdy for, because clearly they don't think he's as good as what he is. So you should be able to get him way cheaper than what he's valued.
Yeah. And we'll see if another team takes advantage of that. MC says, Rob, you bleeped the person's super chat, but I hear you say the F word. How does that work? I was really mad, so I said the F word. It's basically, I got fired up. I don't like to swear, but I was mad. So that's the logic on that. MC says, love you guys. Keep up the great work. Michelle, before we go, we do have to get to some of our reviews, our roast and toast. If you're new to the program or you missed it from earlier, we want your reviews on Apple Pods. Your 5-star ratings and your reviews on Apple Pods mean the world to us. They help people discover us. But we want to give you some incentive to just not, don't just do it because you love us and you want to support us. Do it because you get something out of it. And what you get out of it in this case is Michelle toasting you with her mimosa while also roasting me, because apparently that's what we've decided to do on the program. And somehow, even though I'm the boss, I've decided to let this happen. So we have a couple more reviews before we go.
Yes, I did one in the beginning. If you missed that, you can go listen to it after. But this comment was left by Vinny V. It says, one stop for all 49ers content. If you're a 49ers fan, this is your one-stop shop for all things related to the team. Rob and the crew deliver fantastic perspectives, blending a perfect mix of optimism, pessimism, neutrality, homerism, and passionate rants and inside analysis. Whether it's daily updates, breaking news, drive-by-drive recaps, best bets, or fun banter, you'll get it all. And he gives props to all of the team, including myself. So yeah, that's why I like this one. And he said he would recommend it enough for any diehard Niners fan. So cheers to you, Vinny V. Stats, you love staying home so much, even your remote control is getting bored of you.
That one wasn't as mean as the Trey Lance one.
The meanest one was the first one. These aren't really that mean. By Motto Maniac, it says best 49ers content available. I'm a 49ers fanatic. Can't get enough of them year round. Rob and his crew are amazing at not only being entertaining, but being fair, pragmatic about the information and how it's being delivered. You get also the 5-minute daily updates, shorts, as well as long form shows. I find myself checking the podcast channel multiple times per day.
Yeah.
Stats, the 1990s called, they want your peacoat back.
Okay, so that's a personal thing because like I wore a jacket to Houston when I went to visit you. It was 35 degrees, and yeah, I have a peacoat. What's wrong with that? That is a personal dig, and you know what? I knew you weren't going to hold back, Michelle. So thank you. Now I'm getting to see all the little things. The truth comes out now. You think I'm old. You think I'm a homebody. You think I have no style. By the way, you're not alone in that. I texted Steph Sanchez and Jason Aponte a picture of these shoes that I was planning on buying. And I was like, hey, what do you guys think of these shoes? Are these cool? And Steph's response was, for you, yeah. Like, what the hell? Like, what? For me, yeah. So it's like, all right, we know you don't have any style or anything like a Riz or anything like that. So yeah, sure, you can buy those shoes. So you're not alone in that, Michelle.
Listen, the peacoat wasn't the best look. I'll just say that. Last one, Sporty Ubex. Great podcast network. They say, I started listening to Rob's Daily 49ers and 5 to get updates on the team and then found the other shows that are part of the network. I don't live in the Bay Area anymore, so the Gold Standard really helps me in the loop with my team. I love the real and honest talk and fun banter with the different hosts on the shows. Keep it up. Stats, you're so skinny. Even your reflection needs to eat a sandwich.
Hey, this body doesn't happen by accident. All right. I'll say that. People have criticized me. That's always the thing on Twitter. People are like, oh, this pencil neck guy can't talk about football. I'll just say this. I can eat whatever I want, and I've weighed 140 pounds since college, and I'm 40 years old. So kiss my ass. I win. All right.
I'm just jealous.
Right. Keep those reviews coming. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate them. Again, it does support the podcast. It moves us up the charts. So when people search for 49ers podcast, we're higher up. If you have to scroll down to find our show, we're screwed. You're never finding us. Nobody scrolls. So please keep the ratings and the reviews coming. We really do appreciate it. I promise if you give us a minute of your time, we will make it worth your while. Just give us a chance. And as we have seen, buckle up, because this offseason is going to be a hell of a ride. And we will be here with you every step of the way. Michelle, it's Friday. You got any big plans for the weekend?
No, not really, for once.
Look at you. Oh, your remote control is bored of you.
I am going to play kickball tonight.
See, there it is. I knew you were going to do something. You don't just ever stay home. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye, y'all.